Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Caregivers Spirit. My name is Maria Alejandra. You can call me MA. I'm always a little lost for words here because there's so many things swirling in my head. First of all, thank you so much for the beautiful comments, messages, and notes of encouragement and notes of. I received a bunch of comments of other people saying, I feel seen. Thank you for doing this. And it just fills my heart. I do see the great importance of opening up a space like this and the great responsibility that comes with it. And I want to approach it with as much of an open heart as possible and with the courage to speak our truth, right? And also the courage to know that we can live this path with a lot of love and a lot of light. So today's episode, I've been thinking about this whole week. My heart is heavy for everything that's happening in Los Angeles. I lived in Los Angeles for 3 years after college and before moving to Miami. So LA holds a really special place in my heart. I have friends there, and so far the friends I've connected with are safe. It's really eerie to see places that you recognize in such a state. And I send lots of love to everybody out there, whoever happens to listen to this or somehow connected to the people that are going through this awful tragedy. And I have a couple of links below where you can donate. And, if you feel in your heart that you want to spread some goodness and help for a lot of people that really need it. I also wanted to bring it up in the scope of this particular podcast because I found myself feeling a strange sense of recognition in what I was seeing, and particularly in the responses and the reactions of the people whenever they've caught them on camera, which it's a double-edged sword, right? To catch people in like trauma like that is not the greatest. And also if people are willing to share their story, then that's a really positive is a weird word. That's a really proactive way to actually show the truth and the humanity of what happens. It's not just a house, it's the person that lived in it and the life that was cultivated there, et cetera, et cetera. Not just a school, not just a business, not just all of the things that have been destroyed. And I found myself going through all of these waves of grief. And I'm walking grief all the time. Being a wife to somebody who was diagnosed with a terminal illness, my grief, I always call it like I got airdropped in this new land and terrain of grief, like the land of grief. And I'm just been exploring it ever since. So I'm always exploring it. I'm always in some state of grief. And I found myself, like I said, connecting with the experiences that these people were having. And I wanted to give a little bit of color to that, imperfect as it may be from my perspective, understanding that it's not going to be everybody's perspective. But I think there's something in the feeling of it, and in the distress, and in the upheaval about the experience of these people whose lives have been changed forever, and the experience when somebody, particularly a family that is now facing a terminal illness, begins to face. So I looked up today, we can talk about, basically I want to bring up the idea of trauma. And the definition of trauma is a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. And in these situations, trauma is something that happens in a very quick moment. So the quick announcing of a diagnosis, whether you're in the doctor's office or the person that you love is telling you, you somehow find out. And for those of us, obviously for the person living it, that's their own story to tell. I'm speaking of it from a caregiver's perspective, so I'm never going to assume that my story is my husband's story, for example, even though him and I do communicate a lot. So I have a pretty good feeling, but I will never, not a feeling of what he's going through, a feeling of how he sees the experience. I will never, ever. I'm probably the closest who could understand what he's going through. And of course, I will never understand what he's going through. So this idea of trauma, when something deeply distressing or disturbing happens. And it got me thinking about that first hit of trauma, like I said, that thing that happens that just sweeps the rug from underneath you, that thing that happens that turns your life upside down, inside out. You don't even recognize your life anymore. And all of a sudden, you feel like you have been sucked into this black hole where you are living both in fast forward and slow motion at the same time. There's all these sort of realities that come crashing down all over you when something like this happens. And you could connect with this in terms of other news, other occurrences in your life that have been deeply, deeply distressing, deeply traumatic. Your life feels like it's no longer yours. It feels like you're living in this sort of weird space where you can't really connect with more, other people, because nobody will ever understand exactly how you feel. In the instance of having a whole collective of people go through that experience, then there's that also added element of the collective trauma, and also hopefully the collective healing that they can give to each other. In our instance as caregivers, there's sort of that individual point of trauma. Collective in a smaller scale, because we share it with our intimate, with the person that we're now going to be caring for. And hopefully collective in a broader sense through experiences like this one, where we're sharing our stories and we're hearing about what it's like to walk in these shoes. So that first hit of trauma, and I recall vividly, emerging from the doctor's office, the neurologist that told us the first time, I'm afraid this could be ALS. We're going to now do all the tests and all the things, which took a couple more months to get the diagnosis of ALS after ruling things out, because there's never an official diagnosis. There's no marker in your body that says yes, ALS, no ALS. You're always working with crossing off other possibilities off the checklist. And ALS is sort of what's left when you can't, there's a certain symptoms, obviously, that show up in people in very similar ways, but it's also still pretty much a mystery disease in a lot of ways. So I remember vividly walking out of that neurologist's office, holding hands tightly with Jules, both of us, starting to just tears starting to flow, getting into the car. And it's like this moment of, when I say you're going into a black hole, it's like all of a sudden you're like sucked into this vacuum, because everything up until that point that you thought you had created, and everything that you are now going to move towards, and every single aspect of your life, will be forever changed. And at that point, you know it's going to change. You don't even realize the ramifications of everything that is now changed, but you feel like there's this void, like going into this vacuum of an experience that is so hard to define. For myself, it felt like just being like yanked into a different dimension. And all of a sudden I was looking at the world around me through these very different eyes, and this very different feeling, and this very different energy. And the trauma that then sets in terms of all the questions that you have, the fear, the grief, what is this going to mean for me? What is this going to mean in our case for children? What is this going to mean for our future? How quickly, how much time will we have left? There's so many questions that just like flood your system. I remember for me personally, and this again will be everybody's individual point of view when and if it happens. For me personally, a lot of those questions were sort of like quieted. And I remember having this very serene, quiet, calm, eerie feeling that felt oddly peaceful within all the turmoil, right? Within everything that was now sort of beginning to appear before us. But there was this sort of pocket. And when people find themselves in that pocket, that's where I want to get to a little bit here. When a person finds themselves in that pocket of this sudden, the rug's been pulled from underneath you and your life as you know it has changed completely. People that are standing on the outside may not know or understand how to relate to and how to come in to support that person. And this is a conversation that can unfold over many, many podcasts. But I wanted to mention just a couple of things that we can say to the person who's gone through that hit of trauma. How do we show our support? How do we not overwhelm the person we know is experiencing this? Because in that moment, there's not a lot going on in terms of calculating everything that is going to take for you to move through this. It is completely uncharted territory. Faced with this kind of news is completely uncharted. Hopefully you can find certain resources and people that will begin to guide and show you based on their own experience, and then you can weave that into your own and make your own decisions. There are spaces like that, thankfully. But ultimately, this becomes a complete inside job in terms of how we move through this. And in large part, I do hope that this podcast helps us remember that we do have a choice in terms of how we engage with this experience, how we move through each experience. Not easy by any means, but we do have that power, even if we can't even understand how that works. Even if you don't believe a second and you're in it right now, you don't believe a second of what I'm saying, and you think I'm full of BS, the power that you have to keep moving through is within you. Absolutely. So what do we say to someone who's gone through something like this? The first thing that comes to mind is the idea of, whenever you're ready, I'm here for you. Whenever you're ready, I'm here for you. And to not expect replies, to not expect information, to not expect a list of things that you can come in and help with, because quite frankly, in that moment, we don't know what we need. We don't know what this looks like. And in the future, we are so stretched. Our bandwidth is so beyond exhausted. Like, we have no bandwidth. It still is really, really difficult to articulate, what do I need? And of course, there's ways to make this happen. And we can talk about that in further episodes, because there's certainly, ways that we can prepare ourselves for that. But in that initial moment, asking somebody, what do you need? And expecting them to list a few things is challenging. So what does the person do that's trying to support? Well, you have to perhaps make some decisions on your own and maybe take some chances in terms of what that person might need. If they're in a situation where they could, do with some help with meals, or they can do with some help with childcare, or they can do with some help with, organizing things or anything like that, and you can kind of foresee that, then whenever you're ready, I can absolutely help you with A, B, C. And the person is going to say thank you, or may not say anything at all. And tell the person, I'm here for you, and I'm just a message away. The idea is you want to show up. And I find that it becomes challenging. And after living this experience myself, some people will know what to say. And those are very, very, very few. Some people will kind of, sort of stumble through it, and it's a little bit messy, but the heart is there. They're there, they're present, they're accounted for. Many people will not know what to say, and they may not even say anything at all. And then you're left wondering, okay, so who's here? And these can be really isolating experiences where people can like parachute in to support. And you see this all the time when these kind of calamities and hardships happen all over the world and in our country, is that people will step in to, with donations and raising money and sending supplies and attention and sharing on social media, whatever it might be. And then something else happens, and that, the attention's no longer in that space. But the people that lived through that are still going to keep living through that. Not only do they now have to figure it out and probably feel really isolated while they do it, but the trauma of that moment and the trauma of what you're now experiencing keeps resurfacing and keeps happening over and over again. So you find yourself in a constant sort of fight or flight mode where your spirit, your mind, your emotions, your even your physical body might be compromised because of the extreme shock of what's just happened. And maybe at first, after the shock, you're one of these people that does really well. And I'm someone that, even in the experience of a shock, thankfully I don't turn off. Something clicks in me that goes into doer mode, and I go into figuring things out. And maybe you're one of those people as well. But ultimately, that just becomes a cover and a necessary way to get through the really tough moments. The processing of that moment of trauma continues to happen again and again and again. And that really necessitates people to keep showing up for us in whatever way they can, but in a way that feels significant. Another thing that I wanted to share in terms of how to support someone who's gone through something like this all of a sudden is, if you have a group of friends or family members that are all, that all know each other, let's say a cluster of friends, a cluster of colleagues, is to bring people together and funnel the information maybe through one person so that you can tell one person what you might need. There's two things. There's many things, but let's say the practical angle of what I might need is sort of the stuff of life, right? The material things, the resources, money, time, help, like physical help, stuff like that. And of course, there's all the emotional distress that happens and all the waves of emotion that you now begin to go through. So don't pressure anybody to tell you how they feel or tell you what they need. But if you're interested in helping them, then trust me, you can show up and you can figure it out. I've seen it done. Another big one, and this is, I think, the last one I'm going to share for now, is to please don't catastrophize about the future. So questions or comments like, "Oh my God, how are you going to do this?" Or this is one of Jules and I most favorite things, is talking about somebody else in your life, or that you knew, or that your colleague knew, the cousin of the aunt of the friend of the colleague, whatever, who went through something similar. No, just don't, because it makes it about you, quite frankly, rather than the person that just went through this that is in complete shock. Or comparing it with something that has happened to you in your life experience that might be that you think is similar. 99 times out of 100, it's not. And my husband has a great joke about this in a set, because we've both been in situations where people will compare what he's going through or what I'm going through with something that's happened to them that honestly to us sounds trivial as all heck. And like, oh, okay, let me bring out the tiniest violin I have available and play it for you, because boo-hoo. I think it's really important to be honest about these things, because then the people that are responding and reacting to this happening, maybe in their own families, maybe to their friends, maybe to someone that they don't even know, that they see in a doctor's office or in the supermarket, fill in the blank, that they sort of have this inner checklist of what are some of the ways that I can interact with someone, that I can show my support, that I can share my openness, that I can convey to them that I am here to help them hold this really difficult thing. And I have no idea what that looks like. And I'm not expecting them to know what it looks like, but I'm here. I'm in the periphery. And it's almost as if, you're standing in the midst of this turmoil, and around you, you can sort of see on the periphery these people that stand as these imperfect pillars of help, because it doesn't have to be perfect. I say imperfect very intentionally. It doesn't have to look any certain way. And the best thing to say when you are not sure what to say is precisely that. Don't make up stuff. Don't bring up the belief systems that you believe in that give you peace, because they may not jive with the person that you're talking to. Focus all of your attention on this vast open crater that's been created in this person's life. And the only one that can visualize and have the perspective of what's happening is the person that's in the middle of this massive crater of what my life used to look like. But if you're standing around it, right, on sort of the ledge, the edge of it, just hanging out with this sense of peace and openness, willing to jump in whenever the person raises their hand and says, help, I need you. I need this and this and this. And if the person asks you and you can't, for some reason, do whatever the thing is that they need, which is totally, of course, plausible, maybe there's somebody else that you might know. Maybe there's another way that you might be able to make that happen for them. And take that on. Don't just tell the person, oh, why don't you call this other and do it, because overloading whoever this is happening to is kryptonite for them. And then what happens is that we're just not going to want to say anything. We're just going to say, don't worry, I'll do it myself. And trust me, this keeps happening. It's at the beginning and it's throughout the experience of caregiving. This wasn't totally the episode I was planning on sharing today. But you know what? When stuff happens in life, it's like if I don't keep it real, I don't want to create something that doesn't feel like it's alive with the energy that I'm experiencing and that we are experiencing together. And I could have pre-recorded an episode, which I was planning to, and it would have had a completely different tone. But this feels like the most authentic way to share. And I've a little bit of mascara smudged. I'm going to leave you with one quick sad story. Happy, sad. I went to the zoo today with Skylar. We have a great zoo here in Miami. I went with some friends from his school and some moms. Shout out to those beautiful moms. Thank you for bringing us into your circle. It means a lot. And we had a great time. And at every turn, I thought about Jules. And at every turn, I was carrying my heart and had a knot in my throat. And this is not new. This has been happening for the past almost 5 years, pretty much. Whether him and I are together at a certain place and I witness things that would have looked a different way with us, or they will never be. And when he's not with us, he's not able to come with us, which is really a great majority of times now, unfortunately. It really, really, really sucks. So for all of you that are carrying around the heavy heart as you experience the world, seeing maybe places that you used to go together. And the zoo for us, we went, from Skylar being pretty young, he loved animals. He knew all the names. And Jules loves animals and nature. So the zoo is one of his favorite places to visit. He would go with Skylar many times, just them two, while I was working. And it's a really special place for us. And at every turn and everything I see, it reminds me of him, and it reminds me of us. And those moments of grief will hit you completely out of the blue. And it's like a sucker punch. Is that what I want to say? It's like a sucker punch to your gut. And you're living this kind of in your own world, processing it as you go. As I walked through, I also thought, how does Skylar experience this? Today, he didn't point out anything in particular that he was feeling, but those memories are there. The energy of being in that place is there for him with his dad. And the memories are beautiful, and I'm so grateful for them. And I was thinking about the pictures we have, and I was thinking there's this one particular picture of the first time we took Skylar that Jules is holding him, and it's one of my favorite pictures of them because he looks so handsome in the sun, and Skylar looks so adorable. Yeah, I thought about that one in particular today a lot, and many others, and the ones that he would send me when he was going to the zoo. So this is what's real. This is what's real when we're doing this thing called caregiving for someone who we love deeply and who we have a deep connection to, a deep life experience with. So hold your people tight. Go give somebody a hug. Send somebody a message. Go reach out to someone who you know has been having a hard time and say, I'm here for you. You don't even have to say, I'm sorry, it's been so long, I've been so busy, oh, blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's another episode. By the way, if you have suggestions on what people could say to caregivers, or people that have gone through a really traumatic, distressing life event, please email them to me, comment wherever you're watching this, or send them on Instagram. I'd love to maybe compile a list that we can share. So yeah, go message somebody. Send them your love. Tell them you're here for them. Don't say, I'm sorry, I haven't talked to you. Say something like, I acknowledge I haven't been here as much as I would have liked to. And that sucks. And you can say, I apologize. No excuses. That's the rule. Don't just sit back on your sorries. Sorry doesn't cut it. Sorry doesn't fill in the hole. And then people make all these excuses of why they haven't shown up because, life. And then you're reminded of all the things that you can't do because your life has changed so completely and dramatically. And then it's like, wait, what? And you're sort of there like, tell me about. Again, I'm going to bring out my tiny violin that I carry with me at all times. Tiny violin club. What do you want me to do? So they don't go through the whole like blah, 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 and then just show up. Just say, hi, I'm here. Say it in your own way. Bring in humor, bring in love, bring in your honesty. And every time you do something like that and you stretch yourself to be that much more connected with somebody, it can feel uncomfortable because we're not used to, unfortunately, we're not used to having those conversations with people. It's not something culturally that we've been taught how to do. For many of us, it's not something that's been modeled openly. And so we are not sure how to interact with people when they're in really tough situations. So we might just like cave in and go into our little shell and sort of pretend our way through, maybe think other people will be there for them. I'm not really qualified. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. Other people can say the right thing. But there's only one you. And if this person has a relationship with you and you consider yourself that there's a closeness and there's a connection, then when you foster that and you stumble your way through reuniting with this person or showing up for them in any way, it's so, so powerful. So powerful. It cracks your heart open. It softens your edges. It makes you really understand and believe in the humanity that connects us. Not the things around us, not the stuff that happens, not the circumstances. That sort of that fabric that weaves us all together. All right, I'm done blabbering. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you being here. I hope you subscribe, send comments, share this. Please share this with anybody that you know that could benefit from this type of content. And I hope to see you next week. Be well, my friends. Mwah. Adios.